What I was going to talk about initially was the concept of lean in healthcare. Now, lean as a concept in itself, as probably all you administrators understand, isn't particularly inspiring, and I was told to be inspiring during this talk by Chris. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about it in a way that it's converging with the lean that a lot of you in this audience, a lot of the startup guys understand the term. And to me, that's quite interesting. So the one meeting familiar to the administrators is, actually, before I start on that, I just wanted to start off with a quote, I think, which is basically the theme of this talk, by Alvin Toffler. The illiterate of the 21st century won't be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn and relearn. Okay, so learning is the theme, both as an individual and as an organisation. So the first type of lean that people traditionally associate the word with is that one pioneered by Eiji Toyota, founder of the Toyota Motor Company, and it was a process of continual improvement, trying to minimise waste. And a lot of people modelled their own manufacturing and product processes based on their ideas, which is based on the idea of Kaizen. Kai, the top figure meaning good, and the bottom meaning change. And I think I should have actually spoken to Mike before this talk. We could have worn the same clothes as well.
One was Chinese, one was Japanese. Try to be culturally appropriate.
That's right. The other is the application of lean principles to business development, popularised by a guy called Eric Ries. Now, this is the fundamental here is minimising wasted effort, solving problems that basically don't exist when building a business by testing assumptions early and cheaply. Failing fast is the basic idea. Granted, failing fast is not a concept that would be applicable to health enterprise in all its aspects, but aspects of it definitely are. And I don't want you to think you can't fail in healthcare. You definitely can. You can learn. I think that's one of the ideas that you have to take away. The concept of failing isn't what we're talking about. It's a concept of testing assumptions, hypotheses, and then learning from it. And it's very similar to the concept of agile development, which Mohinder mentioned in software. You have a hypothesis. You build a product cheaply. You test that product with your market. You get them involved very early on in the process. Then you go back to them a couple of weeks later. You say, did this do what you think it was going to do? Does this solve your problem? Yes, fine. We'll improve it. No, we'll go back and reiterate. And it's this continual process of reiteration, very frequently over a period of a long time. Very different from the traditional model of development or software development in enterprise, which is you give somebody a list of the fundamental give them a list of your requirements. They go away 6 months later, $2 million later, give you a product that you then have to use, doesn't solve the problem you initially thought you had because you haven't gone through this process, and you end up adapting your workflow to the software rather than adapting the software to your workflow. And this is probably my biggest take home from this talk. Falling in love with the problem and not the solution. I spent a year of my life in 2009. I took a break from anaesthetics training for fun, to learn how to program, to do a few things, take a bit of time off. But also spent that year and tens of thousands of dollars trying to develop a sponsorship marketplace for medical education events. So my thought at that time was the reason why medical education events didn't get non-pharmaceutical sponsorship because it was too hard, that it just wasn't available. So I spent a long time, didn't talk to enough hospitals, didn't talk to enough people organising education events about the problem. Got this thing up and working, and then when I finally did start going to the hospitals, they said, well, we actually don't think conflict of interest for medical education events is a problem. And so, yes, so fall in love with the problem. That's the take-home message. Here's another example, mobile computing. Companies trying to jerry-rig existing solutions into solving problems using technologies that they had, whereas Apple thought about it deeply right from the start, from a design perspective, and created a new standard in mobile computing. Now, I can hear the geeks in the room laughing. Now, what you all the geeks in the audience are good at recognising is inefficiencies in your own workflow and in the workflow around you. It frustrates you, because you know that there's ways that you can automate it. You do it in your own life. And it's because you have the tools to do it. And you do. And if you don't have the tools, you have friends that have the tools, and you can solve those problems. Healthcare institutions are a hotbed of inefficiencies. Anybody's worked, all the clinicians in the room know it, and it's just as frustrating. A lot of inefficiencies ripe for automation. Hospitals, healthcare organisations may not be as enthusiastic about this as you are, but enterprise and healthcare in general has a resistance to change, and you would all know this, and it's often for very good reasons. Brand reputation, patient privacy, legal risk. Somebody in that organisation is responsible for that risk and could lose their job over that mismanaged risk. But there are aspects to the workflow in healthcare enterprises that are not mission critical and that don't involve significant risk. Stuff that you take for granted in your daily life as geeks, feedback forums for user requests for web services like user voice, ubiquitous now for web services, but not present in any hospitals that I've worked at. Simple, frequently asked question interfaces for common work-related queries. Like, how much valuable time do you think's been wasted in hospitals? People hanging on the phone, waiting for IT, calling for IT support for a question that's been answered the same way 100 times in the last 2 weeks. So to all the clinicians in the audience, and it's really great seeing the clinicians in the audience, thanks to Mike for putting that email out and getting you some of it here. For those of you that have noticed an inefficiency in Workday, where would you go? Just think about where would you go to easily record this in a way that's useful for the person responsible for patient flow in your hospital. I can't think of anywhere that I could do that at the moment. Somewhere where you can just quickly go, get it off your chest and move on. I don't think I've ever worked in a hospital where I could do this. If you have, please let me know. So I'd like to show you a short clip I came across recently about a hospital with no waiting rooms.
The software is part of the medical center's war on waste that started more than 10 years ago. At the time, the center was losing money, and Dr. Garrett Kaplan had just been named CEO.
Waste is all those things which add no value for the customer. It's embarrassing, frankly, but we find most processes, 70 to 95% of the time that's spent adds no value for the customer. The waste of waiting, the waste of movement, the waste of over-processing, the waste of excessive inventory.
Kaplan learned that lesson from studying the philosophy behind the world-famous Toyota production system. It's based on the idea that if waste is rooted out along the assembly line, the result is better cars and lower costs. Some of what Toyota does may sound like common sense, but when a little of it is applied here and there, it can add up to big savings. That can mean anything from returning patient phone calls faster to moving supplies to where the patients actually are.
This is my favourite line from that clip. Waste is all those things that add no value to the customer. Just think about that as your patient's sitting there for 3 hours in the waiting room when they could have been at home. So right here in this room, you have a bunch of people with problems that they deal with daily. They've basically learnt to cope with these problems because they don't have any way of developing a solution around it. It's just too difficult. They don't know how to frame the problem, they don't know how to find the right people, and they don't know the options available for them. And on the other part of this room, you've got a bunch of people that know what's possible, know what's being done in other industries. You may know how to do something yourself, or through your networks, you certainly know somebody who knows how to do it. And I'd like to end this talk on an inspirational note. This has nothing to do with lean in itself, but has everything to do with the possibilities of a community like this. This was a product that I saw when I was in San Francisco in September last year. This is a story of an engineer who was working on an image stabilization algorithm for a camera company that had some friends that developed Parkinson's disease and were having difficulty managing their tremor. I really love this story, and I was there, held the device in my hand, used it myself, and it was very tangible, very real. And I think it's a great story.
Mealtime brings people together. It's more than a time for nourishing the body. We nourish our spirit and our relationships. But tremor, whether from essential tremor or Parkinson's disease, takes away from this experience, forcing people to focus instead on the basic task of eating. Currently, there's no cure for these disorders, and the solutions out there often fall short or are invasive. After seeing some of my own friends struggling with their tremor, I realized the frustration, loss of dignity, and social isolation that tremor can have. I wanted to create something that would allow people to go out to restaurants or simply enjoy a meal without stress. We invented the liftware spoon to cancel hand tremor and take the frustration out of eating. For the first time, we have the technology to actively stabilize a person's tremor in a device so small that it fits in your hand. The spoon works by sensing a person's tremor and intelligently stabilizing itself to make the food's journey from the plate to the mouth much easier. Liftware is designed to be part of your life. The device is small and portable so that you can easily take it with you when you go out to eat. It's comfortable and effective because liftware allows your hand to shake, while the cancellation technology in the handle stabilizes the spoon. It's proven to be effective. In clinical trials, we measured on average more than 70% reduction in tremor for different eating-related tasks. It's easy to clean, and it holds a charge for several meals, so you can place it in the charging cradle whenever it's convenient. We're proud to offer a product that allows people to take control of their tremor. When you eat with liftware, your tremor retreats into the background of the meal, so you can focus on the best parts of dining, the food you're eating and the people you're eating with. We can't wait to bring liftware to your life.